LG turned the V30 into a two-screen slider phone, and BlackBerry sees extremely high demand for the Key One. Moto gets ready to drop new modular phones and accessories on the market, and Mr. Chris Davies from SlashGear drops by to chat all the essentials on the Essential Phone. These stories and more, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 255 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Recorded June 1st at noon Pacific time, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and the coolest V around was a V12 engine. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor of Pocketnow.com, blasting the signal from sunny Southern California, joined this week, as always, by plucky podcast producer Jules Wong. How's it going out there on the East Coast?
Would you appreciate a 34-cylinder engine if you could have one?
I wonder, because each one would have such a tiny volume, and the compression on that would be insane. I just want to know what that would sound like. It would just sound like some just little hornet, like something totally gnarly. Because the V12 has such a nice snarl to it. I mean,
you reply that to 1.3 liters, and you still get all those
1 liter V34. I feel like each cylinder is
that's all you need. That's all you need to power a smartphone. And by the way, I should apologize for my voice this week, as I'm trying to get out of this fever that I'm recovering from, and apparently it has
no
spread.
Apology necessary.
Well,
I'm sure
I'm
we're going to have
to the listener who has
phenomenally
to deal with this
absurd
right
conversation through your fever dreams,
your
sweats, nightmares. Mm-hmm. It's going to be delicious.
And the salty...
I mean, like having Hellraiser flashback. It will be glorious.
The salty phlegm that I have to freaking... It's been extra... It's like Dead Sea salty. Anyways,
yeah.
If you're a little salty
got
about
that post-nasal drip going on,
not even that this way, typical allergies have not been affecting me as much. So the post-nasal drip
good.
Is
I got out of a bad hay fevery situation last week, and it was pretty gnarly.
But one thing goes out, the other comes in. So eventually your toddler will bring back 15 more diseases for you to
she's at daycare right now, so I'm sure she's gonna bring back some new plague for me to contend with this afternoon.
So while we're all getting sick over and over again, you might be getting sick of us talking. You might want to send in some questions. So you can do so at podcast@pocketnow.com. We would love to hear from you about your opinions on mobile tech and the uncertainties that you have regarding your personal situation or anything else that might just be in the news. Also, you can spread the joy, the show, and everything that is around us. Hashtag PN Weekly wherever hashtags are appreciated.
True.
And if they're not appreciated where you're at, then you should probably move somewhere else. Really, it's like you don't.
Yeah, I mean, who wants to live somewhere where hashtags aren't a thing that people can click on? Because that would be terrible.
No, you can't even tap on them. That's just a nightmare.
That would be the worst. Mm-hmm. And you've got people that are saying pound as if it's like. On a telephone from the 1980s, come on.
It's a pound sign.
You don't want any of that. It's a hashtag now. Mm-hmm. I think we've all made that transition.
Yeah.
But before we jump into any more tech tomfoolery, as we let the rambling take hold,
are we going into more tech tomfoolery? Technically,
well, no, we haven't even started really, and so before we actually get to the stuff that people are downloading the show to listen to, we should take a moment to thank this week's sponsor, and that is HelloFresh. Now, HelloFresh is a farm-to-box and couch-to-kitchen meal delivery service which aims to make cooking more fun so you can focus on the whole experience, not just that finished plate you're going to Instagram later. Each week, HelloFresh delivers delicious new recipes with step-by-step cooking instructions, each meal designed to take around 30 minutes to prepare. And even for the kitchen novices who might be short on time, that's not a difficult proposition. Sourcing the freshest ingredients measured to the exact quantities needed helps reduce food waste. And I personally have to throw a shout out here because their packaging is excellent. More recyclable materials, and instead of just getting a big, clumsy bag full of food, all of the ingredients for each meal are packed in their own individual containers, which really helps streamline the amount of prep per meal. Less than $10 per serving. You can select between a classic plan, vegetarian options, and a family box if you need to feed more people. HelloFresh employs 2 full-time dietitians to ensure each meal is nutritionally balanced, now offering light spring meals, and they've just added breakfast options, get you started right for that most important meal of the day. It's a phenomenal service. We actually did try it out. Let's see. We did sesame beef tacos, shrimp saganaki with olive tomato sauce over couscous, and pistachio crusted chicken with a cucumber jalapeno salad. This was definitely the winner of the 3, but all 3 meals were phenomenal. Just very well put together, very unique flavors, and the process for putting them together. Again, I'm going to hold this up for the web camera and my exposure is going to be a little wonky here. But when they say step-by-step instructions, again, it's very easily laid out, very well diagrammed, full color photos for what you should be seeing as you're putting that meal together. And it's just a very well-considered service for making sure you have all of the pieces to get this done. I mean, again, if you just have sort of a bunch of ingredients and you're trying to get a meal on a plate in under half an hour, the extra little bit of hand-holding from HelloFresh really does kind of help make the difference. Delicious ingredients you'll love to eat. Simple recipes you'll love to cook. HelloFresh has a special offer for PN Weekly listeners. Get $30 off your first week of deliveries when you use the promo code Pocketnow30. That's 3 free meals when you sign up at HelloFresh.com with the promo code Pocketnow30. And we thank them for supporting the Pocketnow Weekly.
Man, I didn't need to be hungry after that. And especially because I can't even eat without it hurting the back of my throat.
Oh, and yeah, because of your fever stuff. One of the things that I actually really dig. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep talking about
no, please.
Food while you're still starving. The cool thing about the meal delivery services in general and HelloFresh specifically is when you go through and you see the quantities and stuff, it makes it really easy to just hold this card. We actually have a folder now that we keep by the fridge. And if you like a recipe, you can pretty easily recreate it without having to go through another mailing all of the food to you. So it's nice to kind of catalog these things because they're also nice bases to build off of. So when we're looking at something like a cucumber jalapeno salad, I'm from New Mexico. I actually like green chili better than jalapeno. And we can swap out ingredients and play with different recipes and kind of create our own unique twists on them. This has actually turned out to be a really cool service to kind of help just expand our repertoire of meals in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. And the correct answer is Christmas.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's touristy. People will probably make fun of you for ordering Christmas, but green and red combined, that is delicious. Yeah. And if you're not from Colorado, maybe eastern Arizona or New Mexico, you probably don't have any idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, no. Nogales, shout out to you.
Yep. Duke City represent, 505 stomping. Mm-hmm. That's how you smother a burrito.
Indeed.
You have to have both colors.
Wow.
I love it.
I actually do prefer keeping them separate just so that I get the taste. And then if I, coming down to the middle, that's where the merging happens. And that's
because red is just, I think red has just that more robust flavor and green gets a little more citrusy and you can kind of swap back and forth. And it's just great. Yeah, it's just good times. And now
you got the berry, you got the citrus.
I'm salivating here just thinking about my home cuisine.
You're definitely not helping me out here, so I'm going to help myself.
Let's get to some
I'm going to help myself here and talk about the news of the week. And we start off with the Moto Z2 Play, just coming out today as of this recording. and it's just a upgraded Moto Z play. We don't have a Moto Z or Moto Z Force upgrade at this point, but so this was just an out of the blue kind of deal. Snapdragon 626, which is supposedly going to be the upgrade to the 625 that everyone's been a big fan of. A 3000 milliamp hour battery, which is a downgrade from the bigger one on the original Z Play. Although there is 4 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes of storage. And yeah, it's just going to be, it's going to be, $499? Wow, okay. So, yeah, that's $50 more than last time around. Okay, that's not bad. And there are also a bunch of refreshed Moto Z, Moto mods for the Moto Z lineup that you can buy up right now, like the JBL Sound Boost, Turbo Power Pack, and Style Shells with wireless charging too. So look forward to that. Also gamepad. Now, if that were a Switch pad, somehow I would be a fan of that. But unfortunately, Motorola and Nintendo are not coming together like that anytime soon. Anyways, let's talk about Nubia. ZTE's sub-brand is chalking up a pretty cool, loud, and good deal with the Nubia Z17. It comes with up to 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is something that we still haven't been able to say for any phone, really. Snapdragon 835, it's all top shelf. And it's also water resistant to just the boot, everything. And you gotta have a Cristiano Ronaldo's mug if you want to promote a phone. Probably.
You have to, because it's such a beautiful man to put.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dual camera and 23 and 12 megapixel sensors, and there's up to 2 times optical zoom and 10 times quote-unquote dynamic zoom too. So this should be an interesting $400 phone if it were $400, but we're talking about China, so you know what, that sounds just about right for that market. Anyways, shipping starts June 6th, so that's a pretty quick turnover, really. Let's talk about the BlackBerry Key One at this point. TCL really been promoting this lovely deal. It's talked about Rogers Wireless up in Canada garnering the most pre-orders for a BlackBerry device ever, and also just it has Sprint on board for the late summer, but between now and then it has seen extremely high turnover and issues with stockouts. So, and that was just in the first day of availability, and it was available at Best Buy, other places, and all the carriers in Canada, and a couple of others in the US as well. So, definitely something that you need to get your mind over your head wrapped into, because BlackBerry is apparently back. All right, let's talk about something that is a little confusing, to me at least. LG G6.
Well, I think confusing to all of us, definitely.
Yeah, so there's going to be a G6 Plus and a G6 Pro coming soon. Pardon me as I blow my nose. And I can't blow my nose because that was unsuccessful, and I was talking while I was doing that. Anyways, the LG G6 Pro is going to be, there's the Plus and there's the Pro. You would think that the Pro would be the better spec one. That would be rumored. No, it's 32 gigabytes of storage, and basically the rest of the spec sheet is the same. And 32 gigabytes, that's half the 64 on the standard G6. The LG G6 Plus, that has 128 gigabytes of storage plus wireless charging. And those two are going to be sold in Korea for the time being within the month, and possibly globally coming soon, at least before the V30 might be coming out. So definitely some confusion, some interesting stuff going on there. And it's left me speechless as to what what we're really dealing with. LG V30. Let's talk about something that's well, it's a fantasy. It's privish, as I keep calling it. You want a slide out keyboard? How about slide out screen? So this inset second screen that you can pull out to have it become a bigger second screen is apparently being envisioned for the V30. Now, Evan Blast told us that this vision might not be still in development right now, but just the thought of those parts working together, it's questionable. I mean, you could have definitely some great uses. Keyboard for one thing, and other instant responses, Google, whatnot. But these renders and leaks are kind of questionable at this point, especially because of a patent that we had tracked, which sort of indicated some sort of essential phone type of thing going on with the selfie cam lodged in between the edge of the top edge of the screen. So, and this was at least a year. The patent was filed a year before the essential phone came out. So definitely something to continue to look forward to in terms of the V30, which is expected to come out late August. And finally, Galaxy S8, your experience with it in the US has not been complete for the past while. And that is because Bixby voice support is still not here. And it won't be here, apparently, for at least another few weeks, according to the Wall Street Journal, which has learned that the voice assistant, which apparently I believe was coded first in Korean, is still having trouble trying to figure out English in terms of grammar and syntax. So I mean that's what
it's not great.
It's one of the follies of going your own way as a Korean tech company, and then we have this huge audience to serve in many countries with this flagship product that we want to work properly and support. And when you fall flat on your face, there is room to do so.
I mean, they haven't. I think the if we you don't mind jumping into some discussion here, it's less that I think they're falling flat on their face. I think they're trying to prevent falling on their face, which is why they're being so conservative in releasing this. We mentioned this on our previous podcast. If they only make one mistake, then people are going to give up on Bixby before they've ever had a chance to see what it can really do.
And, I think it's there are two things here. Is there room to fall and, and make mistakes still, or has the elevator gone up from the ground floor? Because if Bixby doesn't have a speaker in the next year, sayonara for them, or the Korean for goodbye. But
you're asking the wrong guy there. I have no idea. But no, I mean that point's well taken too. If there is the fear of being sold on a service, a piece of software that was supposed to be included in the price of our phone, and if it takes a year before it's released, then that would be very upsetting. I don't think it will. I think market pressure on Samsung will force them to move. Unfortunately, I think it'll force them to move before their developers and their engineers are really completely satisfied with translating the experience from a Korean audience to a North American one. But that's also the knife's edge, or the tightrope, I should say, the balance game that you need to play in. If this thing doesn't do what Samsung said it could do the first time someone fires it up and they get information or a result or a search, or they scan a photo and it doesn't really do anything cool for them, that consumer is exceedingly less likely to go back and revisit Bixby in the future. So I get why. I get why they're still playing it. But this is also the big frustration is it really feels like all of these companies are kind of duplicating the same level of experience that we've had for a long time now between Google voice search and Siri and Cortana. And I'm still waiting to see what company can really help push us into the next phase of a true digital assistant experience and get developers on board. Because I think a major problem of this is there are so many things that I do on my phone that have very little to do with the actual phone, like have very little to do with Google. And so if I can't interact with Twitter or Facebook or Yelp or any other number of services that I'm, driving service, ride sharing services, book travel. I posted, I'm trying to set up some international travel and I would love for a voice assistant to help me organize flights by the time that I'm trying to, by the time that I'm going to be landing in the various destinations that I'm going to. But anything that I search for is just going to be, well, what time do you want to depart? And you're like, I don't care what time I depart, but I know when I need to be on the ground. Can you help me organize flights that way instead of me guessing what departure time I want and then sort of backwards organizing flights by arrival time? That's a terrible way for me to do this search.
Yeah.
And that's the perfect, for me, would be a perfect benefit to a digital butler coming in and saying, oh, well, here, we've organized this info and this matches up with your calendar because we know where you need to be when you're on the ground and when you need to be there. So here's a flight that would get you in with plenty of time. That would be awesome. I would love that.
And I don't know how it feels for you, but just the way I perceive time, it feels like we've been talking about actions on Google and, those third-party links for Alexa and all that for a while now. And we have, it's been slow to get to the services that we want and we desire and in the way that we would like them to be. In fact, I think it's going to take years and years before we get that kind of standardization, so-called. But, it's in terms of that time scale, we're still dealing with, I think it was 9% in terms of a Oven Market Research survey about digital assistant awareness and usage. Half of the people surveyed said that they had no interest or they weren't aware of it.
Yeah. And
who knows what the other 41% said. Thank you, Wall Street Journal, for that. But, it's... I don't know where the room is, but perceived pressures are going to come down the line here. Apple might announce a couple of... it will announce a chip, AI chip, coming up at WWDC, DC, it is believed. Can't even speak like this. And there is also ARM also announced AI integrated chips too. So you find more of these, speakers and all these players coming at it with just all their swords at once. Samsung.
Well, I also think that there is a notion, because I'm happy to hear that Apple is taking the sort of hardware and the hardware abstraction layer of this seriously, because what I would hope for us to eventually get to is an interface which can also be more discreet. If you're talking to your phone to command your phone to do things, I would love to have so, like when you see in like SWAT, and they've got that that throat communicator so they can whisper and the microphones are right on their Adam's apple. And that's how they're gonna storm this house with a no-knock warrant. One of the problems that I think a lot of people have is they have to sort of express out to a gadget a search query or a command, a reminder, calendar entry, and that takes longer and often is the phone gets it wrong more often than if you just went to your calendar app and punched in a calendar entry using text. And so I think one of the things that would help is, can we make this more discreet? Can we make it more private? So that then also when something doesn't work, I've seen people in public and hey Siri, And you're like, Siri apparently isn't listening to you. After the third try, maybe you should just go to doing this manually. But the second a consumer has that one experience where Google Now or Siri or Cortana or Amazon Alexa doesn't quite get it right, they're probably never going to ask that speaker or that assistant that query ever again. So then when Google or Amazon or Apple update these services and add new commands, your consumer is far less likely to go looking for what new things that voice assistant can do.
They're going to need to get some successive base hits at the, right from the start in order to have any room for a strike.
Oh, totally. Well, and then also it's not overselling it too. I mean, I think that was part of the early death of smartwatches, was making it look like you were going to have this amazing computing experience on your wrist. And it was really a notification delivery platform with some other little extra bells and whistles. And I think it completely misrepresented. When we're talking about digital assistants and, Google Now and Siri, and it's going to be like the computer on Star Trek, and it's going to understand you and it's going to do all these things. And then when you really try it and you're like, oh, this is kind of the same thing we've been playing with for a long time now on other platforms and other services. It's hard not to be somewhat let down by that, when we can also see some of the really cool work being done by other companies that just don't seem to have any interest in moving those products to a consumer-facing industry.
Yeah. I'm tired of using my human intelligence to talk about artificial intelligence. Let's,
Right?
Yeah. You want to talk about LG any little bit?
Oh, we got to talk about the V30.
All right.
Oh, that's mandatory. No, because I am very concerned if this turns out to be a V series phone. So Evan Blass is saying that this is called Project Joan. And just to sort of, kind of revisit what you brought up in the news piece, is that this is going to be a screen which slides up to reveal another screen underneath. And that can be your keyboard, or it can be a customized interface for other apps and services. And I really like the idea of LG experimenting again. Not with a mainline phone. I don't think they should ever screw with the G series or with the V series ever again. I think those need to be platform stable, targeting specific demographics for content creation, for, a flagship phone design in the G series. But I miss the LG that would put out phones like the Flex. So if this were a standalone, experimental, limited run design phone, I would say awesome. Go for it. I want to see what you can do. But if you call this a V series, then I expect best-in-class durability. I'm hoping they'll add water resistance. It needs to be an amazing content creation platform, the best high-end multimedia consumption experience. And I think things like making the phone, over-engineering the phone to add a slider mechanism is going to make it more fragile. It's going to complicate the software, something I don't want to have to deal with or mess with when I'm trying to fire up the camera or use the audio recorder or just listen to music. I don't want other things getting in my way. And so that's where I'm super concerned. I really hope that this was just an experimental mock-up, something that they were kind of playing with, or that it's in some kind of line of V series phones. Maybe that's okay too. But I absolutely want to have a standalone regular slate V30, which just refines what we liked about last year's monster beast of a phone, and we can show progress there, because this will be the third year of V series phones. This would be the year that I think consumers would start taking the V more seriously as its own unique platform of phones. It got a little bit more visibility following the Note 7. You've had people like me preaching about how great the camera and the audio and the microphones are on this phone. This next model year would be a really good year to nail that down, deliver for consumers, don't mess with expectations, but deliver something that's going to be a monster performer for what they focused on in the past. And I don't see that in a slider.
Well, did they really need to pad out with a G6 or G6 Pro Plus? There was room for that.
Stuff is just
was room for
just
that.
Confusing. Well, no, I mean there is room, and because I don't think that there's
They
I
say,
don't think that there's a
the
problem.
anonymous source from LG says that it's working on diversifying its portfolio to serve more of its varied consumer categories. But, I mean, you could have tried that little V30 concept out then instead. I mean, if you were banking on stable releases, you already had them. But you decided, hey, let's put lipstick on. Well, it wasn't really a pig, but you know, it's
No, the G6 isn't a pig. The
No, it's
G6
not.
is a fine phone.
But you know,
I
it's
really like the
it's
G6.
like, but like you're putting lipstick on you know, a degraded, you know, thing. I don't know.
Well, the thing that LG I think is going to face the ire of LG fans. And this I can kind of appreciate why people might be upset by a move like this, is the launch of the G6 was still a bit clumsy for the different variants that went to different regions. And so, you know, if you were in Europe, you didn't get the high quality DAC or the wireless charging. In North America, you got wireless charging and a very capable DAC, but not the high-end DAC. And then in South Korea, you got the quad DAC, very similar performer to what we saw in the V20, but you didn't get wireless charging. And I can appreciate their market research. They focused on the features that they thought would be most applicable to the regions they were shipping, but it always leaves someone feeling like they got an incomplete product. And now,
In other words, it's the
delivering
ultimate
a
modular
refresh
phone.
on the G. Well, yeah. The ultimate modular phone, but you can't change the configuration. It's just
You can't,
this is
but
what you're
LG
stuck
can.
with. That LG can, and that pie's been baked for you. Can't unbake that pie. No, this is but this is going, I think, to add to that sentiment when you get a refresh. You know, so now if you kind of let's say you're in Europe and you went ahead and you bit the bullet and you needed a new phone, you got the G6 and you eventually made peace with the fact that it didn't have wireless charging or the quad DAC. And then these new variants come out several months after. This to me sets up an expectation that you should never jump on an LG product and that you'll always play the wait and see game with them, or you'll eventually just move to another manufacturer. So like, should I buy the V30 or should I wait and see if there's a V30 Plus or V30 Pro or, you know, a V30 slider? You know, it's going to create a barrier, a mental block, some ill will where the consumer feels like they're not really getting everything that they could have, or they're not really getting the best bang for their buck. And that the company reinforces that when they then spruce the product up a couple months after its launch. That's dangerous psychological territory for any manufacturer to be in. And I don't think many companies weather that well. To my memory, over the last year, I think OnePlus handled it as best they could, going from the OnePlus 3 to the 3T, and it didn't really seem to leave too much of a bad taste in anyone's mouth that this was getting a refresh. But then again, we were also talking about a phone that still sold for at least $200 less than what LG is charging for the G6. So expectations should be about 50% higher.
I mean, yeah,
than what you know, like a mid-ranger solution is going to offer.
There's also that, but I mean, the spec you know, just from a first glance, the spec changes seem to be in memory, and in one case, it's a downgrade, 32 gigabytes, and then there was only one with the freaking wireless charging, which was the Plus, and that is expected to go.
The G6,
that's going to go up in price.
Well, no, but the G6 was, I mean, there were some people who were disappointed that the only option that I think most regions had was just the 32 gig model. We knew more phones were going to be coming out with 64 gigabytes of built-in storage. So this to me feels a lot like some of the strategy that we've seen from Chinese manufacturers, where the base model has 4 gigabytes of RAM and 32 gigabytes of storage. And then when you increase, that's where you jump both RAM and storage. And so that looks like what LG could be trying to do here, where I still think it's going to be somewhat region specific. I'll be very surprised if they jump on a G6 refresh here in the United States because of the way that carrier packaging deals have to be sorted out. Like, AT&T's not going to want to buy a new stock of G6s, and when they probably still have G6s in inventory. So if we get an unlocked model of that, great. But we've all seen how major players even struggle with unlocked sales here in the United States.
Yeah, it's kind of a token effort, but at least it's not like the Mini and Max efforts or all the freaking variants.
No, this is definitely still better than those sort of ugly days of like
from a couple of years.
It's still called the Galaxy S4, but it's the Galaxy S4 Mini, and it's
prestige at a different size. We just cut 1,000 corners and.
Right. No, I mean, no, you're absolutely right there, and ultimately, this really does play into the emotional side of our gadget ownership, where as soon as we buy something, we're kind of on the lookout to see, did we get the right thing? Did we buy the right thing? And within a couple weeks of whatever purchase you make, someone's going to come out with a better product, and we're going to think, oh no, I should have waited. From what I see here, having the extra storage would have been nice. And if you're in a region which didn't get wireless charging, but then you get this plus, that would also be nice. But I'm happy to see that they're not really screwing with the core functionality of the phone. It doesn't seem like the quad DAC is going to be making any appearances in markets where it wasn't sold originally. It doesn't seem like they're doing a processor refresh, because I think that would have been very frustrating to be on board early with the G6 on an 821. A couple months later, then they ship it with the 835. That I think could have been a bigger deal, a bigger psychological hurdle for people to feel upset about. And then the rest of the phone seems to be very much in keeping with what LG originally delivered. So thankfully, I don't think they're wrecking what they did with the G6 to try and appeal to new customers. But I can still totally appreciate why some people might be frustrated if they were on board early with the G6 and then seeing a few other nice little perks delivering now.
Juan Carlos always fighting for the small person, the little guy.
Well, yeah, I'm only 5'8", so it's I fit comfortably in the backseat of most Japanese cars.
Inferiority kind of a thing going there, I guess.
My Napoleonic complex at play. We got to fight for all of us, all us little people.
All right. How do you feel? How do you do?
How I do what I do? No, it's the this was an interesting week for news, especially in light of something which I'm hoping will be progressive and disruptive and an exciting transition in the state of mobile technology. We've been dancing around the topic, talking about assistants and software and smartphones and cool design. And I think the news cycle this week was absolutely occupied by Andy Rubin's new venture, Essential. With the Essential phone and the Essential home speaker system that he's looking to create. And so I feel we should probably bring on a guest commentator to help us unpack what this might mean for the future of the mobile industry.
But before we do that, you can search for these stories in full detail at pocketnow.com, hit the podcast section, and look for this show's rundown. You can also check out Jaime Rivera on the Pocketnow Daily on our YouTube channel.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I am very happy to introduce Mr. Chris Davies from SlashGear, going to help us expand on the conversation surrounding the Essential phone. Chris, thank you so much for dropping by the Pocketnow Weekly.
No, thank you for having me. I always like talking, so that's really useful.
Well, and that's why we wanted to have you on, is because we like people who like to talk, and that's a nice little bit of synergy for this, as it's supposed to be something of a conversation.
Everything has come together so beautifully. We should almost end it here now so as to just avoid it going downhill terribly.
Well, and before this completely jumps the tracks, let's jump right in, because I don't want to keep you too long. And there's a lot to unpack here. Is we're talking about the father of the Android operating system, a person with impeccable credentials in the mobile industry, and he's finally taken the wraps off of the Essential phone. And just to jump in, because I think people on our channel have heard me sort of blather on enough about Essential Phone. I was hoping to get what your sort of initial impressions were when we finally got all the details directly from Andy Rubin. All of the rumors were sort of put to rest. How did you feel about the way that this product was launched and what it is that Mr. Rubin is trying to offer in the premium smartphone category?
I mean, it's clearly fascinating. I mean, any people who love Android phones and high-end flagship phones are obviously going crazy about this phone, and I'm no different. It's very, very interesting on a kind of a geeky level. My concern, as I think a lot of people have concerns with, is whether that will ever translate to sales. Or translate to enough sales to make it worth their while, and make this a legitimate product in comparison to something like your Samsungs and your LGs and whatever. I think it's really fun. I think it's fascinating. I don't know if it's going to tip the scales in any meaningful direction, but maybe that's me being cynical and British.
Well, no, I think a lot of us are sort of slow playing what our notion of, so smartphones are mission critical devices now, right? We depend on these things. We rely on these things. It's why, tablets are a little bit of a different market than what we do with our smartphones. And so I think for general consumers, I don't think it's wrong to expect some bit of caution, right? You don't want to take a risk with that one gadget that's sort of the most important part of your daily communication lifestyle. So I really appreciated the fact that, there was all this talk about him creating a new operating system, but that the phone really isn't going to be using the new operating system. He's creating ambient for other accessories and home devices and things like that, whereas Essential Phone is going to be a stock Android device, so we don't have to go down that rabbit hole of, will it get updates? Will it get support? Will developers jump on board? Will it have apps? Can I use Google, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? But I did want to just hit real quick, because you mentioned something about sales, and I thought there was a really insightful interview. Andy Rubin sat down with Walt Mossberg, and they had a Recode chat, and that was brought up. He was pretty straightforward, I felt, about the notion that they would need to build from a certain point, that this wasn't just like, oh, well, if this doesn't outsell an LG G6 in its first year, then it's going to be deemed a failure. But he seemed pretty reasonable about his expectations for how you could break into this market.
Yeah, and I think it clearly helps when you're Andy Rubin and people trust you and venture capitalists are willing to funnel large numbers into your bank account on the expectation that what you're going to be making is something really good.
It certainly takes the pressure off.
Clearly, yes. I mean, any venture capitalist that would like to funnel huge amounts of money into my pocket would definitely take some pressures off. I don't think there's any doubt that this phone is going to work. I think that it probably will feel incredible. I think it's probably going to perform very well. The spec sheet certainly holds up to that. I think as an Android device in isolation, it's going to be great. I guess if I'm skeptical at all, it's whether how that then translates to something bigger. I saw some discussion of them saying, well, we don't want it to sell enormous quantities, because if we went mass market and mainstream, we wouldn't be able to literally build enough of the phones to kind of meet that demand. Right. There's this kind of idea that it's going to be a somewhat exclusive device, which is great, and also a really good excuse for not selling very many of them. And there are going to be some people who will spend a premium for a premium phone. Look at Vertu. Yeah. They, for how many years were they selling a Symbian device and selling just enough of them, I guess, to keep them in fine Corinthian marble and leather and whatever. And
sapphire, lots of sapphire.
And sapphire, beautiful, beautiful sapphire. Yes, glinting like my eyes in the sun. I do wonder whether what's the long-term play here, and I'm assuming he has one. Lauren from The Verge was saying the other day that he was talking about this being the beyond mobile world, and then he announced a mobile device. So there's clearly some long game here, which I think the smart home agent thing will play into as well, which is, if anything, slightly more interesting than the phone itself. But I'm very curious to see what that long game is.
Now, because again, you were saying that this is, it's a premium Android device, but it's an Android device, and it's not like anything on this phone is really sort of rocking the market in terms of the other experiments we've seen from various other manufacturers. But the design of this phone does seem to be just a little bit polarizing. I think specifically that front-facing webcam, the selfie camera, sort of interrupting part of the screen. What did you think about just like the overall look, the aesthetic, and whether or not you think that's going to have an impact on sort of consumer appeal? Because I think a part of this is like this could very well fit in the same experiment that OnePlus started way back in the day. There was like a lottery system to even have the potential to maybe consider the eventuality of pre-ordering the phone. And it seems like Andy's slow playing that and trying to get as much feedback as he can before he actually pushes the button on everyone can buy it now.
I think it's very handsome as phones go. I think my slight obsessive compulsive disorder would find that cutout for the camera just incredibly frustrating after a while. I think just that even if it doesn't block anything, I think just the knowledge of it being there and staring at me, I do wonder whether that is the... I think it shows off the wonderful benefit of, being able to cut a display around a camera, but whether that's something that people wanted, I don't know. I think, they've put a lot of effort into making the material choices nice, to make this idea of it being a device which will last, and I think the modularity plays into that as well, though that obviously is an unproven area for them too. I think like I say, I think they're not going to struggle to find people buying it. I think they're clearly not going to and don't want to sell as many as Samsung will sell Galaxy S8s or LG will sell G6, but it's that, where does it go from there? What is that? What's the long-term plan after that?
Well, and
do we need another OnePlus?
What's that?
Do we need another OnePlus?
Well, I feel like every market benefits from competition. Like, for example, we just recently kind of revisited the Axon 7, right? Another one of those $400 phones from 2016, which really helped illustrate what we could do at, sort of smaller price points. And that to me is like a good segue into talking about, you were mentioning the modularity of this phone. One of the things I felt was most interesting during that Recode interview was their discussion on this protocol, that it's a wireless USB and that the pins are basically there to guide, magnetize, and power the device, but it's not doing any of the data transmission, and that this is Andy's first step in trying to illustrate how we could maybe start I'm putting a lot of prefacing on this, how we can move to like a truly wireless smartphone design. And that I thought was really interesting because, we just recently talked about the Moto Z Play, the new Z Play that's coming out. Motorola is doubling down on Moto mods, but that's still a very, sort of pin connector interface, which transfers all of the information back and forth. If he open sources a wireless USB that works on contact, does that increase the longevity of a device? Are we really worried about the hardware side keeping pace? Because I feel like one of the biggest problems with Android is the software side.
Yeah, I don't think that there is... I think there have been an awful lot of interesting hardware experiments in Android, and we do seem to just keep coming back to a big slab with a big touchscreen on one side and a decent camera on the back. And Motorola obviously is pushing the Moto Mods thing, which I'm really pleased that they're doing and sticking with. We've seen other people try it, give up on it very quickly, whether or not they launch or not.
Right.
Pay plenty of lip service to this being the future of their designs. I'm looking at you, LG G5, and then anyone who buys all of these wonderful accessories and stocks up on them with the expectation that they're going to be able to use them moving forward generation to generation doesn't get to. And it's a great idea, but people have very short-term plans. I think
yeah,
if there's a possibility, it's this idea that he has raised enough money to look at that long term and to make a plan that will last more than just one generation of sales, and not have shareholders to say, well, hang on, no, we need you to make something which makes us a lot of money every quarter.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the idea of an open source wireless USB standard is really interesting. I just wonder does he still have the cachet in the industry, I guess, and does this device still have the out of the gate cachet for big companies like Motorola or LG or whoever to say, actually, yeah, this is something that we could get on board with too, and for all the peripheral device makers to do that and jump in, even though it's an unproven market. And again, I sound very cynical, and I do love the idea. I love the idea of modular phones, but from a really geeky perspective, from a consumer perspective, I'm kind of not so convinced. And I think there are other issues there about how long do we expect our mobile devices to last? How long are they built to last? The inclusion of things like sealed batteries and ports that are disappearing and kind of being replaced by one do-it-all port. I think again, yeah, it's really interesting as a geek. As someone going out and spending however many hundreds of dollars on a phone, I don't know if that's something that I'm convinced that other people will stand behind long enough.
No, I'm definitely in agreement there. I think we've all been sort of discussing ecosystem. You know, if you're buying into a platform or if you're buying into a set of accessories, an expectation. Like, I think the G5 was one of the most spectacular failures for that idea, where it became very clear about halfway through that phone's first year that this was likely not going to be an experiment that LG was going to continue on. So you ended up, you know, where it's not my favorite phone, but you ended up spending money on stuff in that phone that is now end of life. And, you know, we see very clearly from the G6 that their focus has moved on from that. I guess I just find it curious that we still haven't fully maximized or fully utilized the benefits of USB OTG on our mobile devices. I love this notion of a wireless USB 360-degree camera, but I've also recently been playing with USB-C 360-degree cameras that this is universal. You know, every Android phone, I think, running Lollipop on, maybe Marshmallow on. I can't remember. But, you know, a significant chunk of the Android ecosystem, I can plug this directly into a phone and be instantly streaming 360-degree video, and it will move to another phone, and I don't have to worry about compatibility. And so that, to me, also becomes one of the biggest questions is, to you know, sort of expand on your idea there, if Andy Rubin has the cred anymore to drive a significant chunk of market towards adopting something that radical.
I wonder whether we need it. You know, I kind of, you know, I think it's really interesting. I think, like you say, you know, this idea of being able to plug in devices into Android phones and expand them in lots of interesting ways hasn't, you know, it's been around for a while, and maybe it hasn't been as elegant as a magnetically connected wireless USB thing.
Right. That is definitely sexier.
It is. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Rather than cables going everywhere. But I wonder whether it's hard enough finding people who actually want to carry a 360-degree camera in their pocket, and that's a standalone thing, or something that you plug in. Just how laden down, like pack horses, are we going to be? You know, do we really need to take everything with us? I think if you could guarantee that when you went to an office that, you know, would save you a hot desking and you could plug your phone into something and it would have your big screen, and I guess that would be interesting. Again, I just don't know if there's the market there for it. I don't know if this is something that people want or need or have been asking for even. I think it's something that would be interesting if you're trying to sell people more accessories, but we condensed down all of the things that we were carrying, the MP3 player and the camera and the file of facts, and showing my age here, and, you know, all of those things we put into one phone, and now someone's saying, well, hang on, why don't you then try and expand it out from that again and plug in more things? Now, I don't know if the mass market certainly wants that, and I'm not entirely sure if the geeky market, of which I count us both, wants that either.
Well, you know, I think there is a desire for it. I think one of the biggest issues is the scenario you just described. There's no infrastructure for it. You know, like I look at the concept of something like Samsung DeX, and I think that is stinking cool. I thought it was cool when Microsoft tried it on the Lumia 950, using that continuum. But then the notion that I'm going to go somewhere and plug my phone into what to do this work still doesn't negate
you're having
me
to carry
having to travel with a
around the
laptop.
dock. Yeah, if you're having to carry around the dock with you and all of the accessories with you, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, why? You know, why am I bothering? Why am I bothering? I think that there is a really interesting potential play here in that, you know, you have situations kind of in the wider world beyond phones, which apparently exists. You know, things like laptop travel bans, and you know, I have people who travel a lot saying to me, well, you know, what am I going to do if I need to go internationally and I can't take my laptop on the plane, or I have to check it and I don't want to check a bag, or it might get
I'm going to ship my laptop separately through FedEx,
I'll Amazon Prime myself one overnight to the hotel in Rome or something. And again, Andy Rubin has the money to do that, but most of us don't. And I think that it would be very interesting to see a forward-facing hotel chain saying, well, okay, we're going to put a dock for your phone into the hotel room so that you don't have to worry about bringing a laptop. You just dock your incredibly powerful smartphone into this, and just like we've been giving you speakers that will play music, you know, now we're going to give you the ability to turn it into a PC and kind of do whatever you might need to do, work on the road and not have to worry about bringing a laptop. But again, like you say, it's that ecosystem and that kind of harmonization of that ecosystem. And you can't expect people to put in a Samsung DeX dock and also a dock that works with LG phones and one that works with iPhones.
And it's even funnier
everything.
in a climate where, like, the last business grade hotel that I stayed in had a Bose speaker alarm clock that still had an iPhone 30 pin connector on it. So trying to think about the hotel industry actually being bleeding edge here. I mean, even IKEA had problems trying to move wireless desk chargers for phones. It does seem to be something where I think the industry needs to drive the consumer interest to a point where it makes sense to invest in this stuff. But then we have that chicken and the egg problem of, you know, who's really the early adopter on this? Can they now motivate purchases? And I've been sort of saying this for a while, that I think the leverage that we geeks used to exercise over the industry is sort of waning as more of this tech becomes lifestyle oriented. Like, there's a little less reason to listen to us for some of these more out there bleeding edge discussions until somehow a technology comes full around where consumers are the ones motivating the discussions, not those of us at the bleeding edge.
We were very powerful for a while, and then we lost our power when it was realized that other people would buy things and spend a lot more money on it. And it was easier to make mass market devices than sell to some really, really loud complaining geeks like us. So,
well, and it's the life cycle of a lot of smaller companies. Like, we see them go after the enthusiasts, and then a couple years later, they're making 5 or 6 different versions of selfie phones.
Which we need. We need more selfie phones.
We do.
If people can't see my face, then what's the point? Really?
I'm upset if I don't have at least 4 cameras pointing at my face when I have to use both hands to operate my mobile photography solution.
This is why I need drones. That's why I'm looking forward to the first drone that doesn't need me to. I want to be followed around and constantly stared at, and potentially put that on the internet and make some money. But yeah, you need to find people with niche interests for that. And yeah.
So real quick, I just want to put this on pause for a second. Jules just instant messaged me to ask it, were you recording on your end, the audio?
Yes.
Okay, good. So let's all right, let's shift gears. I also, because you brought up the new home device that Andy Rubin also showed off to. Yeah. This one, so I have been old man crotchety about the notion of more listening devices in our homes being quasi assistants, but kind of only good for a limited set of questions or commands. And then listening to Andy Rubin describe what Essential Home was going to be and how they were trying to develop partnerships with Google, with Siri, with Cortana, with Amazon, I'm actually a little more concerned on this arm of the strategy. If this is the post-mobile world, I don't think we're getting to that cool computer Star Trek future that nerds like me have always wanted.
No, I think we're getting to a situation where you have a chorus of not very intelligent robots that you can ask for a poor answer. So you get to decide, do you want to ask Alexa for a bad answer? Would you like the Google Assistant to confuse you a little bit? Or do you want Siri to misunderstand you and tell you about the weather in Beirut? I think you're absolutely right. I think there's under this umbrella idea of giving consumers choice, it's kind of ignored the fact that what consumers actually want is a friendly robot helper who doesn't need to be trained or doesn't need to be educated, doesn't need to go away and think about it or have umpteen levels of reworking in the background. They just want something that they can ask a question and get an answer that isn't nonsensical. And right now, none of them can do that, really. That there are some things that maybe Alexa is better at than Google is, and that Siri is better. No, okay, maybe that Google is better than Alexa is, but it's not great. It's not meaningful choice if you just get to choose between mediocre products in one form factor. So now I sound like a crotchety old man. Yeah.
Well, but this is another thing. Like, I feel so much of what we're being sold as progress is being built on this notion of cool, which companies have yet to be able to deliver. I mean, we just got another news report recently that, Bixby was going to be delayed even further. The full Bixby experience was going to be delayed on Galaxy S8s. And so obviously doing an assistant speech, speech interaction type of software search or software app integration is very difficult. But I still don't think that we've gone much beyond. I can point my camera at something and then Amazon can give me a link to buy it, or I can ask what the weather is, or I can set a reminder. And these are all things that we've been able to do fairly well. I mean, I remember using Vlingo on BlackBerries and being able to do some very similar things a long time ago. And it seems like we keep kind of coming around the same, like, well, now the voice assistant has a higher quality voice, while I'm looking at IBM Watson commercials and, IBM Watson is coming up with recipes for food trucks. And you're like, I would like to eat a recipe that was designed by an AI system, but Bixby can't even scan the stuff on my toy shelf back there and give me a meaningful visual search result.
I think part of the problem from my perspective, and obviously, unlike you, we try all of these different home assistants and different virtual agents. There are times I just don't want to have to ask for it. I want something that's more proactive. I want something which will,
right.
I don't know, which will look at my calendar and look at, where I am and look at who I've been speaking to and kind of, and if I'm going to give over all of this personal information, I want to get something really, really worthwhile back for it. I don't want to have to go and say, so, well, what time is it back home in the UK? I want it to know that, if I call my parents for that, weekly guilt phone call, that it's going to tell me, it's going to remind me to do it. It's going to set the call up. It's going to nudge me to not forget, so that when Christmas comes around, they still love me. So I feel like that there are lots of things to ask questions of, but I just have no real motivation to ask those questions. I want something which will say, okay, we've got this, Chris. We're going to go away. We're going to do this in the background and look at all of these wonderful things, whether they be food truck recipes or ways to make my life more streamlined, or shows or books that I might be interested in based on what it knows about me. I don't think there's any kind of shortage of information that I'm willingly putting out there,
right,
about what I like and what I'm interested in, what's important to me. No one's actually acting on it.
Well, and I think a lot of us can remember that excitement the first time on an Android phone where, I mean, if you had to commute to go to work and the phone would give you that alert saying, hey, you might want to leave 5 minutes earlier. Mm-hmm. And we've looked at traffic in your area, but we still haven't done anything much more exciting than that in the world of proactive information dissemination.
It's bizarre, yeah. I've been saying, my example that I've been using, and this is how depressing it is, I've been using it for the past 6-7 years, is that I'm someone who likes coffee. I don't mind spending a little bit more for an independent coffee place rather than a Starbucks or the Pete's, right, or whatever. And if I'm walking along somewhere and my phone knows that there is a highly rated independent coffee shop around the corner, why isn't it telling me there's a highly rated independent coffee shop around the corner, Chris? Why don't, you've got a few minutes in your schedule, why don't you head on over and have an espresso or something? And I mean, we've seen sort of maybe, I'm thinking maybe HTC Assistant, which is just kind of top of my mind because I was reviewing the U11 recently, and that kind of, starts to say, well, maybe we could do a little bit like that and suggest restaurants when it's lunchtime, but it doesn't seem very personal to me. It's not, there's nothing saying, well, okay, this is what Chris likes to do, and here's what his assistant is going to help him to do. I don't know.
Well, and I feel like by the time we get to that point, we're all going to be programmed to ignore those types of pop-ups. Like, I can't tell you the number of times, because from all of the different phones that I have to set up, every single time I go to a Target and my phone goes, hey, this is a great opportunity for photos. And you're like, no, it's not. It's a Target. I'm not going to share photos publicly of me buying a deodorant at Target. That's not an experience.
I think you're underestimating your audience there, but yeah, no, I mean, and you're absolutely right. There's this kind of, it gets it wrong, and then people don't use it anymore because it gets it wrong. Right. And then the flip side of that is companies are very cautious about it. I think when the HTC Sense Assistant came out, on the U Ultra, and a lot of the time it just didn't give you any suggestions. And people say, well, HTC, why is this? Why is this assistant so quiet? We wouldn't pay a human assistant to be this quiet. And they said, well, we don't want to get it wrong. We don't want to put people off using it in future because we've given you incorrect suggestions. So I guess it's a tough one, because if they give you too much and it doesn't fit with what you want. It's the target situation. And you're like, well, hang on, no, I'm not going to let you look into my calendar because you're giving me really, really bad suggestions.
Right.
You don't need to know where I am because I'm not getting any value from this. And if they go on the other end and play it safe, then we complain because we don't hear from the assistant at all. So I think we're in that really, really tricky place where the AI is getting smarter and the voice assistants sound better, like you say, but what they're actually delivering to us just hasn't kind of tipped over to, I don't know, much more than a book of coupons.
Well, and even then, it's a book of coupons often for products that I don't care to use. To circle this back to Andy Rubin and to Essential, I got the concern that Essential Home was starting to sound like my absolute favorite XKCD comic, where it's someone sitting down and going, there are 13 different ways to do this. Someone should just come up with one way and make it the standard. And then there's another panel that says 6 months later, and 2 different people are sitting down saying, there are 14 different ways to do this. Someone should create a new way to do this that just becomes the standard. Jules has the comment, the comment unlocked.
Good.
I've referenced this so many times. Jules, you're awesome.
I wouldn't go that far. Good, maybe, yeah.
But that was the fear I was starting to get when Andy Rubin was describing what their idea was for Essential Home, that this was something that could rise above all of these other assistants or these other products, interoperability, synergy, paradigm, buzzword. And so you had mentioned that this was potentially something that you found, I don't mean to put you on the spot or make you defensive, but something that you found might have been a more interesting move, that this was the companion product, I guess, for releasing a phone in this market, and then getting us out of, if we're really going to achieve the post smartphone world, is this the product class that we should be turning to? Is this going to become another thing like smartwatches? You know, we've kind of peaked on wearables as they currently exist in the, Bluetooth headsets, things like that. What were some of your feelings as to like where this might go and what this might indicate for the future of Rubin's company?
Well, I do feel very put on the spot and defensive, but I'm going to try and work through that. No, I think
that's why I like you. You're a pro. Yeah.
I'm crying inside, and I've had a lot of surgery on the outside to make it
stiff
not
upper
show.
lip. Stiff upper lip.
It's literally just the way I'm standing. I think I'm interested by it because it's not just another Android phone with a Snapdragon 835 and a decent camera and classy construction. I don't know if it's going to be the one that will take us into this brave new world of AIs. I kind of doubt it. And I think, like you say, this idea of it being an umbrella for lots of other different assistants, when what I really want is just one really good assistant, doesn't bode that well. I guess my interest in it is that I think that this proactive kind of collaborative idea of a smartphone, not just being or a device, I should say, this, not just being a phone that I pick out and take out of my pocket and look at when I want something and then I put it back in my pocket and go away. This more kind of persistent, all-embracing kind of agent that is going through life with us rather than something that we consult periodically. I find that more fascinating. I don't know if what Andy Rubin is doing and Essential is doing is going to be the one that will deliver that, but I like the idea of what he's talking about, of it being something where I have to think less about, well, what question am I going to ask?
Right. Well, and what question do I want to ask, and how do I need to phrase that question to get a meaningful response, and how do I keyword that, and how come when I ask a question I can't put something in quotes? I'm just going to type it.
So, I mean, clearly this is why Alexa is getting a camera, so that we can do air quotes at the same time, and she will know what we're talking about, and also to look at us naked. Yeah.
Well, but also, I mean, this to me, it feels like we keep reinventing the wheel, because I think back to the conversations when because my wife works for a video game publisher. And when the newest generation, the current generation of consoles were coming out, we had like some really long conversations about whether or not we were going to go Xbox or PlayStation. And one of the things that was a major vote against the Xbox for her was Kinect. Cameras and microphones in our home, always listening. Who has our bucket of data? How is it protected? We were going through like celebrity hacks on on Apple's cloud storage, and it really shut her down. Like, no, I think we're going to get a PlayStation, all because she did not want, this sort of spy in our living room was sort of the idea that she just couldn't shake. And I have problems, under that same, talking what you're saying, the philosophy of where do we go next from a momentary interaction which dedicates all of our visual, mental, and tactile attention to operating this thing, blocking out the world around us, is where do we go from there? And if part of this is the persistent fog of digital butlers, then I feel like the response that we get has to be exceedingly better than the interaction I can have by typing something quickly into a search box.
I think you're right, and I think the butler mention is interesting because I think it's the parallels there are pretty clear. You wouldn't allow a butler into your house to kind of help set out your clothes and dress you in the morning and serve you if he was accidentally ripping your shirts and spilling soup onto you all the time. So it comes down to value. Am I getting enough out of whatever this virtual butler is for me to be okay with this idea of entrusting some big company or small company, whoever gets it right, with all of my personal data and the knowledge of where I am and what I'm doing and who I'm talking to and what I'm wearing.
Well, and also, is there also a notion of trying to make this interaction just more intimate? The thing I was really hoping to see from Samsung, especially following their Bixby announcement, and from other companies too. I mean, we've been flirting with wireless earbuds. Of getting to something kind of like, I'm not like the movie Her, just to kind of harp on something that I think geeks really enjoyed the depiction of, that kind of interface, where if I'm gonna have conversations or ask questions or get relevant information through some sort of audio interface, I'm kind of surprised that the main focus has been on a home speaker which stays in one room that I then have to, I live in a 2-story condo. So do I keep the Google Home in my office where I spend a good chunk of my day, or do I put it downstairs where, my daughter's constantly babbling and, running around because she's a little toddler? Or
you buy 2 of them or 3 of them or 4 of them.
Where do these things live? And then also, if I'm going to use other features too, like music streaming or media consumption, podcasting, things like that, my phone follows me throughout my day, even in my home. But that's something my Google Home can't do without, like you were saying, without having a network of these speaker things kind of always all around me.
And I kind of see there being a differentiation there between what would be an incredibly personal device like a Here, kind of Hair even, sort of this idea of this whispering technical friend in our ear who kind of just gives us little hints and keeps us going through the day and makes our lives more productive and rewarding or whatever. And this idea of a home that would be a component of that experience, almost like you have your chauffeur during the day, and then you get home and you hand it over to the butler, and the responsibilities for looking after you and your family or whoever you live with kind of are shared between the different devices, and it picks and chooses the most appropriate way of communicating that data with you depending on what that data is. There are some things that I don't mind being shouted out in the middle of dinner, through a home speaker, and there are going to be other things which I would just like to have carefully whispered into my ear, so that it doesn't distract other people or other people don't hear, or this is just there's different layers of privacy and kind of involvement there. And so I think there is a place for both, but I think the experience on either front is not there yet. But the people I hear saying that they love products like Google, Amazon Echo and Google Home and that kind of thing most are people with families, with children, and the kids love to talk to them. And I don't have children. I don't really believe in them, but I guess that is a good selling. That's...
I mean, when you say you don't believe in them, you acknowledge that they exist. It's just you don't.
I'm not even sure I'd go that far, to be honest with you. But I have seen smaller people, and they could just be tiny adults at a distance. That's perspective.
If you ever need just that little extra bit of evidence, you come and visit. And when my daughter gets home from daycare, she will infect you with the plague, because that's what toddlers do, and you will have a
Really
better
tempting
understanding
offer,
of the existence of these tiny little individuals. So that's
still, I mean, it could just be an adult a lot further away. I don't know, but I think that, you know, but that's an interesting niche where, you know, that this is somewhere that people are finding that, yes, you know, young people do enjoy just talking to something and having answers parroted back by something that doesn't get bored if they ask the same question over and over again. And I think there are niche cases there, but at the same time, I don't necessarily want that device and that young person to also be able to accidentally order things or check my work calendar or put "Daddy must go to the park for 3 hours" on my schedule tomorrow. So, you know, it comes back, I guess, to these different layers of what I expect different devices that I interact with on a daily basis to do and to know about me, and what kind of intrusiveness levels that I'm willing to put up with.
Yeah, and that's definitely been another conversation we've been having a lot in our home too, where I think my less than 2-year-old daughter's idea of what technology is, she understands cameras. So she likes seeing people take pictures, and she likes seeing pictures of herself. And then she also understands video calls. So so whenever we pull out like my laptop, she'll come running over and say, "Nani, Nani," because she wants to call my mom. She wants to talk to grandma. So, you know, we're trying very hard not to let this just be like, hey, here's where you can watch Sesame Street and just sit and consume and, you know, just be a lazy schlub. It's communication, and she's starting, you know, as much as a toddler can, because, you know, she's starting to figure out crayons and cameras and all this stuff is creation. Like she can make things. In a very rudimentary sense. So
are you
we're trying to focus on that.
Your daughter isn't good? I mean, because that seems, again, I don't know a huge amount about children, but I feel like you're supposed to just praise them no matter what they do, no matter how terrible it is.
Yeah, well, you know, she's my daughter, and I love her like crazy, but you know, I'm not that parent who's going to try and trick people into thinking that this is some new exciting modern art. Like it's a lost Basquiat. You know?
I think you could make a lot of money for that.
Yeah. You should. With like a painting recently sold for like $100 million or something like that, and you look at it and go,
"If your daughter could do that, yeah, that's."
I like, hey, we've got college kind of paid for. Excellent. Yeah. Well, Chris, I really want to thank you for jumping in. We kept you a little bit longer than I think we meant to, but it was a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to help us unpack some of this info. This is all really so we're all like really curious, but I just think there's the notion of competition, which is really exciting here too, and from someone who has such a celebrated history. You know, from working with Carl Zeiss to Apple to creating Danger to inventing Android before Google bought it out, that if anyone deserves some bit of coverage, then it's definitely Andy Rubin. I know a lot of us are having some of those like hesitation, first generation. This is something early. We want to keep our expectations in check, but I am, you know, I'd be lying if I said I weren't a little sort of giddy to try something that this guy does.
I think if anyone can do it, it's probably going to be him. So I guess no pressure, Andy, but everything, literally everything, the future of innovation in the smartphone space is resting on your shoulders. So
and
don't
BD,
mess it up.
Yeah, you know, just it's cool, but you know the
take the
future
weekend, have a think about it.
take a day, have a sit.
You know, whatever you do. Yeah, I've got some coffee on. Yeah, you bring the donuts. Yeah.
Ooh, I could totally go for a donut. Yeah. And there you have it, folks. Another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. The show is over, but the conversation continues. You can find Chris on SlashGear, and you can stalk him on Twitter as C_Davies. Jules is at PointJules, and I'm humbly at SomeGadgetGuy. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. Shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology, and by dropping reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever podcast reviews can be left. Once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor, HelloFresh, sending us great meals. Definitely check out that promo code to get 3 free meals, Pocketnow30, when you check out. They're helping us keep the lights on here with some tasty home-cooked meals, but ultimately there would not be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness, so make sure you tune back in.